Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to be talking about how to move in a pandemic. It's myself, Rune, and Richard who'll be joining us in a minute. And the way that we're going to do this, the three of us are going to just take a few minutes each on an area that's kind of significant to us and our businesses. And then once we've done that, probably about 5, 6, 7 minutes each, something like that. We'll open up for any questions that you guys might have for the final 15 or 20 minutes. So, Rune, would you like to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, I'm co-founder of Fantastic Services. We're primarily inside the M25, but also the rest of Britain. We're expanding to as a franchise, but we do almost all property services, from removals, handyman, locksmith, cleaning, end of tenancy and end of lease, and we do pest control and so forth. That's my introduction. We're talking about how in the COVID pandemic, how to do contactless services. And in March, when we were informed by Boris to make some changes, we were very quick into making changes. One of the things is we run a franchise business, which made it slightly more easy for us to do removals, where these are sometimes very much family-run businesses. So it was one family that could do this. We also did everything we could in order to do the 2-meter rule. We even had a couple of fully video surveyed where the key was dropped off to us, and it was everything on the removals were done via video. So these are all possible. There was a lot of things that are now possible. The technology has moved so far into being able to move more contactless bookings. So that was how we did removals. There's a lot of other services we were providing that also allowed us to say, well, when a cleaner was there, we could do that. They were at the supermarket at the same time. So, because they're lucky that they have multiple floors, which meant they could spend time on their other floors while doing it. So I think we were able to perform quite safely and to be operating during the pandemic. So that's how we moved it.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Rune. Richard, do you want to just quickly give yourself a introduction, say hello to everybody, and let us know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, no problem. Apologies for the delay in coming in as well. It managed to give me the wrong link and it put me backstage. So so I'm Richard Abbots. I'm the founder at Inventory Hive. So we're a cloud-based platform that essentially allows paperless reports with audit trails for inventories, interims, checkouts. So we're used by universities and letting agents all around the UK, from smaller independents through to bigger franchises.
Fantastic. Thanks, Richard. So yeah, you missed it, but I'll just explain to everybody that we're going to do just a few minutes each. Rune's just mentioned a little bit about removals. Was there more that you wanted to say about that, Rune?
Well, I think, except that I think that that was one of the easier services to perform contactless. It was one of the easier services with the video surveys. Now, thinking about it in the back burner of it, there's more things to do with technology that will allow us to do even more safe services. One of the big problems was that you couldn't be a team of 6. So some of the bigger moves, they had to be structured differently. So it was a team of 2 because they were families. So that meant that some of the moves took longer and had a different number of drives. And we're continuing with it. So now we're allowing it for be more flexible in what you want to do. There's also complete moves where the tenant or the owner wasn't present at all, and it's done by a video, which was very helpful as well. There was also a lot of moves. I mean, we saw the industry on removals were absolutely exploding. People were moving out of inner city London into a different zone. So we saw that explosion of removals, and that's still going on at the moment.
When did that happen, Rune? Did that start straight away when the pandemic hit, or was there a bit of a lag on that?
There was a very short lag. We're talking about 3 to 4 weeks, and then the demand just increased up to a point where it was tripling of what we've never seen before. So very much last year there was that, and it looks like it's still continuing And also with everything else that's going on in the property market, we see the same demand going on with regards to removals. So it's a very good time for us on removals. There's other things that's not so good, but removals is definitely a business. I think Richard, you said the same when we talk about inventory services as well. You said the same about demand.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I suppose in terms of the safety aspects as well, it's about, you know, I think COVID really focused a lot of businesses in that, you know, it's about having a risk assessment in place, you know, control measures in place that are clearly communicated to your teams as to how they should be behaving in a certain way in different circumstances. And I think, I mean, I suppose in the UK at the moment, you know, we're in a fortunate position that things are hopefully, certainly in June, going to be going back to as normal as possible. But even then, I think that will focus the mind on organisations and you know, what health and safety protocols they've got in place in terms of, you know, being on site, you know, the kind of thing that COVID has perhaps brought to the fore. Really, it's got us thinking a little bit more about how we operate.
Yeah, well, good point. Like COVID was very much a well, not COVID, viruses and bacteria were very much a minor part of risk assessment before this came along, weren't they? And it's very much at the forefront now.
Okay, Will, tell us a little bit about yourself. Sorry for.
I was going to thank you, Rune. I'm going to quickly say. So, my name, for those of you who don't know, my name is Will. I'm the co-founder of Green Kite and Agents Army. We're a property services company specialising in inventories, end of tenancy cleaning, and general maintenance. We carry out around 15,000 bookings per year for London's letting agents, landlords, and build-to-rent operators. So, I'm going to talk about today. Well, Rune's talked about removals there in the pandemic, which I thought was really interesting. I'm going to talk a little bit about inventories and more particularly about cleaning. And both of those things take place around the time of the transition between tenancies. The biggest risk area for tenants in the pandemic, really, because that's where you're getting a lot of people coming into the house and there's more risk of transmission with those extra people. So I'm just going to talk about that kind of period around the tenancy transition. And firstly, I just want to highlight the difference between cleaning and sanitation. So although they're linked, I would kind of define cleaning more around physical appearance of something. So dusting, cleaning ovens, removing lime scale, that type of thing. Whereas sanitation is more to do with the health outcomes, which is obviously very relevant to what we're talking about today. And so as that tenant changeover process is where the biggest risk area is, I thought it would be useful just to have a look at some of the things that can be done to make that transition process as safe as possible. Some of the things that we've done and other companies similar to us or letting agents that we deal with have done. And the first one, and the most important, I think, is time. So that is leaving as much time as you possibly can between tenancies. Now, obviously, there's a cost implication there for landlords who want to reduce voids as much as they possibly can. But we know as well that COVID can only survive outside of the body for a limited period of time. Not just COVID, but all bacteria and viruses can only last outside of the body for a limited period of time. There's some debate whether that is a few hours or maybe up to a week, but it doesn't last forever. So if you can leave the property empty for as long as possible before tenancies, and that's going to reduce the risk of, if there was COVID in the property on any surfaces, being transmitted to the new tenants. And I think this is the tenant satisfaction survey. And I think if you're moving into a new home, you want to feel confident that you're not going to catch COVID from the home that you're moving into. So I think that's important, is that time side. And then the next thing, and Rune talked about this as well, is about reducing the risk of our people having COVID. So we're sending people into the property in that transition period to clean it, to sanitize it. And the last thing we want is to send in people that have got COVID. So there's various things that we've had to do to try and minimize that risk. And the first one was something that Rune's already mentioned, which has been really important, is only using teams that have members that all live in the same household. So people that are in the same bubble. So that was a big change for us and something that I think was really important, because we know from Sage and the government, one of the major risk areas has been different households mixing. And if we've got 4 or 5 people sat together in a van together for 2 or 3 hours of the day as they drive around, you can't social distance there. And that is a big risk factor. So we had to change to people, to teams that work together in the same household. And the second one, this is more relevant to our inventory clerks, is we stopped them using public transport. We know again that public transport is a big area for transition because it's so busy. Millions of people using public transport every day. So we stopped our inventory clerks using public transport. They started using cars or bikes or whatever method they could to get around, which I think is important, but it's not a long-term solution. There are environmental impacts that are just as important as COVID in the long run that we need to consider. And so getting people back onto using public transport as opposed to using vehicles is something that we're going to try and get back to. And then it's also about like the strict adherence to the guidance around staying at home and getting tested if you have got any of the symptoms. So, and everybody knows the guidance here, but I think it's about making sure that your team are aware of them, and that if they have got a fever, if they have got a persistent cough, that they are not going to work. They're not going to go and clean somebody's property. They're going to go and get tested. And if it comes back positive, they're going to stay until they get stay at home until they get a negative test. And the last thing I just want to mention here, because I think it's an interesting discussion point. It's not something that we've done. It's not something that we have any plans to do, but I know other companies, Pimlico Plumbers, for example, have talked about jabs for jobs. So only you to go into other people's homes if they've had the vaccine. Now, I'm sure a lot of people have got a lot of different opinions on that, but I thought I'd just put it in here because it is something that I think is relevant to what we're talking about today.
Well, you're opening a whole can of worms there. I mean,
I am opening the whole can of worms.
The WHO, and then it's like whatever you can agree with Charlie Mullins of Pimlico Plumbers or not. I think he just does these things for PR. That's my view on it. The very simple fact on the matter is the WHO says like you cannot force anyone to take a vaccine. A vaccine is not like another drug you're taking. There's no disclaimer saying like if something goes wrong 5 years down the line, you have no choice. Which is why if you force that stuff, then you are going to have to pay the repercussions for this vaccine if it goes wrong. So that's why I said I'm out in that aspect.
Yeah,
it's an individual choice. There's no debate about it in my eyes. I mean, it's like.
I suppose to play devil's advocate with that though as well, it would perhaps also be useful to know if the incoming tenant to that property was in one of the vulnerable groups. Or perhaps if you had somebody in your family that was going into a property, they're in a vulnerable group, they might have some comfort in knowing that the people that have been in there within the last 48 hours, had been vaccinated. So I suppose this, you could look at it from a couple of sides, couldn't you? Really,
definitely. It's definitely a controversial subject. I think people have got lots of different viewpoints on it. I think you're right, Rune. He does drop a grenade for PR purposes every now and then. So perhaps it was more to do with that.
Sure. I mean, just talking about this for the security, because that was the same thing. We had very big questions on all our clients, like, are you in a vulnerable group, right? And that meant it was a completely different. We took extra steps on certain things. When you said like tick box, bam, and we asked the question over the phone when we took the booking. It was very clear that had to be a completely different, one level above, because that's where we said like, look, we don't want to jeopardize anyone, and it was at our cost to do that. And I think that's fine. I think the stuff about the vaccine, I don't want to go on about it. It's what it is. It's people's choice. Period.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think it was a PR bomb, but I think the idea of going further in the future will, and then you will agree with this. We had the discussion about that. What are landlords and what are communal areas of sanitation? We have a common door handle in a lot of the properties. We have a lot of this common areas that have high traffic areas. We call them high traffic areas, and exactly as you said, one thing is cleaning, which is physical, and then the sanitation, which is also a different product because it has to be antiviral, not just antibacterial, which is the common stuff you can buy in the supermarket. And there's antiviral, which is a different area. And whether you're disinfecting your hands when you go in, whether you place a disinfection in front of this, that was one of the things I didn't see. We thought that there was going to be more like in Italy, because they shut down completely, but then the areas that had to run, they were much more stringent on what had to be done in the communal areas. What do you think the future brings here, Will, and Richard as well, on common areas? That's one of the things that I'm looking at. What does the future bring here?
It's a really good question. Sorry, Richard, you carry on. I've been
I was
waffling on
going to say that
on.
from a cleaning perspective, that's not necessarily my expertise on that one. So I'll defer to you on that one, Will. But,
okay. Thanks, Richard. I was going to say, communal areas. There's a vast array of different communal areas. If you are a landlord and you own a house that's split into 2 flats and it's got a communal area which is 1 flight of stairs, that's one thing. But if you're a build-to-rent operator and you have got a building with 180 flats in it, with thousands of square feet of communal area, the approaches to those 2 different things are completely different. But I think certainly the high traffic areas in properties that are communal, I think landlords and agents are going to look more and more at what the solutions are there for making sure that they are sanitized and that they are safe.
Well, I agree with you, Will, and what I'm thinking about is the same as we did with our end of tenancy and fantastic services, like you did, was like, first of all, there was the street show, and then we also said, like, I think we still did Airbnb cleaning, or what we call short-let rental cleaning during the it was nothing compared to what it was post-COVID. That sector kind of like really evaporated for a while. Then we got short-let happening as well, and that created a different sort of area. And then we made sure that on the bookings one, we wanted to do it as an antiviral cleaning and as a guarantee. And it's the same with end of lease cleaning and end of tenancy cleaning from the estate agents we work with. There was a couple of estate agents who were very picky and said, like, this is how it has to be done, and that we welcomed it. It wasn't much more expensive, and you know that, Will, because the antiviral products are not enormously expensive, especially when you're doing the fogging part of it. It wasn't a massive cost. Because it was actually quite efficient to do the fogging. Yes, the machinery, but that was a one-off cost. So we said, okay, well, make sure we have the machinery and the training and the respirators to be able to do that, so we can do the antiviral. So that's where it was very long way forward. But should we start putting stamps and saying this is antiviral sanitized by fantastic services? That's what we asked. It's a good guarantee for the new tenant coming in. Is that a way of going ahead of it?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Rune. Richard, do you want to? I think you're going to talk about some of the inventory side of things, particularly around some health and safety stuff on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think I suppose when the pandemic first kicked off, so to speak, back in March 2020, one of the first things that became apparent, that obviously meeting tenants physically at properties, whether it be to perform an interim visit, an inspection, or whether to check them in physically, it was quite clear that wasn't going to be the way of doing things because of the risks associated with it. And one of the things that I suppose with the whole purpose of this summit, it's all about tenant satisfaction, and it's, I think COVID has been a real driver for really, well, not necessarily through choice, but actually it's accelerated people turning to different solutions, that perhaps they wouldn't have otherwise considered. So things like being able to, to check properties remotely. Businesses have been doing, inspections via, communication tools like WhatsApp. By sending electronic forms and having tenants engage and feedback with them. And, in terms of actually doing a physical attended check-in, meeting a tenant at the property, I think that's one of those processes that for a long time, letting agents, build-to-rent providers, they've always considered that process as a really great service delivery piece. It's the opportunity to meet the tenant, walk them around the property, make sure they're settled in. And I think often, certainly over the last couple of years with the tenant fee ban kicking in, I don't think agents have always questioned whether or not, actually the tenants really value that as a process. Because I know landlords might, because they feel that it's an opportunity to get an inventory document signed off. But actually, the whole purpose of this, as I said before, it's about tenant satisfaction. If you ask a tenant, what they want to do on the day they move in, and surprisingly, their response will be they want to move in. They don't want to go. They don't want to go wandering around the property, looking at skirting boards and looking at doors. Sometimes check-ins can be used to show how something functions, but often that process isn't really done in that way. It's about often getting a document signed off. And one of the things that as a business that we've tried to pioneer, and really the whole reason we set it up in the first place was that we felt that tenants should be engaged more when they're moving in. And I don't feel that should, irrespective of COVID, I don't think that process needs to happen by doing a physical attended check-in. And actually, obviously, the past 12 months has made businesses look at why they do that, because actually, and obviously I'm not going to use this to entirely plug Inventory Hive, but there are digital signing platforms that allow tenants to sign for documents remotely, i.e. confirming receipt of a report, and then given a window in which they can feed back after they move into the property. Because actually, if you give tenants a convenient way to do that, and it's not necessarily in the first few hours they move in, when they've got their removal van waiting outside, they just want to get in. And let's face it, they'll sign anything. So we're now in a position where actually those attended check-ins, I think not many businesses will go back to doing attended check-ins when they've really, if they've been able to implement a successful remote process, because it's about having the tenant move in and self-service themselves. We live in an on-demand era now, don't we? It's like when you watch the telly of an evening, you don't say to yourself, oh, so-and-so's on at 8 o'clock, I'm going to plan my evening around what I want to watch at 8. You watch it when it's convenient for you. And it's no different really for, in the property industry, is it? You look at maintenance platforms and all sorts of stuff these days. The prop tech era is about tenants being able to self-service in a convenient way. And
Richard, because we have some questions from the crowd here, so I just wanted to interrupt for a second. Is it legal to do a unattended check-in?
An unattended check-in? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Of course it is. Yeah, I think I think
the technology. We have a couple of questions from the audience. So the technology is there to do an unattended check-in, and it's legal to do it on the contract. They get a signature of the check-in, because the other question follow-up is do you think things will go back to normal after COVID? My view on that one, and you can ask the same, Richard, is no. People will be doing a lot more things remotely. Especially check-in, check-outs. I mean, we see even removals now. It's like they're not even pressing. They go on holiday, and it's like, can you just move it in by the time you're going in? Because I just want my things going in. So.
Absolutely. I mean, the question you asked there with an unattended check-in, I think the issue that we have commonly raised is about smoke alarms, and actually having the tenant verify on the day that they move in that the smoke alarm is in a functioning order. Now, one of the things that we introduce is tenants confirm receipt and they sign a declaration that they've tested the smoke alarm on the day they move in. Now, they do that when they confirm receipt prior to move-in. On the day they move in, they can then it is quite explicit in there that the smoke alarm functions and it's audible. And they have the opportunity to then go in and comment and take photos and go back, and it audit trails things. So I think that's that self-service element. I don't think many businesses will go back to the way they did things before with attended check-ins. I mean, the tenant fee ban drove that quite substantially a couple of years ago, because it was a case that agents were really looking at things thinking, well, actually, we're paying somebody to go on Monday and do an inventory, and then on Wednesday, we're paying someone to go there and do a check-in. So that either the landlord or they were subsequently paying twice. And I think I'm not saying there isn't a place for doing it, because I think there are circumstances where there are, and when it's done right, from a service delivery thing, I think it's good, but often it's not done for that reason. I don't think. I think it's often done just to, to get something signed off, or to say actually this is what tenants want, and not question whether it is what they want.
Yeah, you're doing me out of a job there, Rich, but I'll gloss over it. So I think
obviously you do it well. You do it well, Will. So I'm not
right. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think I was just going to say about the tenants not attending the check-in. It's the same with the cleaning as well. Actually, a similar thing. We really need to try and, which we have done through the pandemic, of the tenants not being on site and nobody else being on site where possible, having that delineation between contractors, so that you haven't got a cleaner there, a maintenance person there, an inventory clerk there, and the tenant. 10 people all in the flat, kind of pushing past each other. That's something that has gone throughout the pandemic. But I was just going to talk about some processes and procedures and from the tenant's perspective when it comes to non-attended check-ins. So I think that the key thing there is that if the tenants aren't attending, then there has to be a procedure in place for them to be able to sign off the inspection to say that they agree with it. I think that's the one concern of tenants and agents and landlords. I think if the tenant isn't there, is the tenant is going to say at the end of the tenancy, well, I wasn't there, I didn't agree with it. So as long as there's a process from the agent, or preferably from the tech solution that we're talking about, to show that the tenant has signed it off and has agreed to it, then I don't see there's any problem with attended checkouts. I think it's best for all parties, actually.
Yeah, and one other thing as well that was perhaps a subtle difference that's often overlooked is you'll often see inventory reports that make comments like it's good or it's clean unless otherwise stated. Whereas I feel that if you're doing a digital process, you need to be really explicit for the tenant, because if you ask a tenant to describe a wall, they will say, oh, it's a white wall. They won't say, like an inventory clerk, oh, it's free of marks, it's free of picture hooks. Those explicit things I think should be in. If you're doing a digital process, you need to be quite explicit. Whether that's a templated approach and then you subsequently add the detail onto it. It's just those little subtle things that really focus the mind on someone reading it, i.e. a tenant, that actually that wall, that ceiling isn't free of marks and mold. There is an issue, and they comment on it. Whereas if you just say, it's a ceiling, sometimes they'll overlook that. So
okay, yeah. I like that. I like that comment always. It's like, it looks okay. What? Yeah. Okay. Is it moldy? Is it wet? Is it no? I think tech can do a lot of this stuff. Also in training, we saw in some of the other panels with Uber and estate agent viewing. We did a lot on our tech platform on the service side for fantastic services on guiding checkouts. Like check this. Have you checked this? Take a photo of that. So it's more like, is there any sculpture marks? Yes, no. Is there any picture hooks? Yes, no. Is there any? So you can, with technology, make the user experience much more easy, and that's what's coming up now. And I think as a landlord and as a property owner, I think on the final notes of it, there was a question about a landlord, can I do things to make things as safe as I can? Can tech help? I said, yeah, tech is one thing, but as Will and as Richard said, I think the overall idea of safety is about hygiene. It's about sanitation, and I think that's where, if you're a landlord, then I remember some of the properties I run myself is like, I send out a cleaner to come once a day. So that's on multiple properties, just to come once a day to wipe it down. That was as much as I could do, because there's no government saying you should be doing that in communal areas. Actually, we saw a drop in the number of communal area cleans because, they're not being used as much. On the contrary, it should have been ramped up. That's one of the things I saw with the industry. And I think that's something that tenants, when we're talking about the tenant satisfaction, is tenants are going to be asking you in the future, going to be asked, how often is your communal clean? Because my communal clean in some of the places that I was living in and we had, that was once a quarter, if that. That was communal clean, right? The rest was like, just do a vacuum. How often is the communal sanitation going on, right? You might own the property. How much is that? So we saw a lot of landlords talking to each other and a lot of property owners talking to each other. It's like, how often are we going to do that and do that clean? It did increase though. and we know that from demand, it didn't increase. But as a landlord or a property owner, that's what you can be thinking about. And it's actually not as expensive as you think, because as properties are starting, there's some areas where it's become much more regular. The prices aren't that high. We're not talking about a deep clean. We're talking about an antiviral wash or an antiviral filtration of cleaning on high frequency areas can be more regular without the cost coming up to it. So I was thinking, as a landlord, that's what you should be thinking about. How do I make sure that that continues? Because it's not just about COVID, right? There's a lot of other things out there. We know that we both studied hygiene. We understand hygiene and understand the difference between a clean and a sanitation. So there is a longer term difference of it, and it's not just COVID. A lot of other things happen.
I think it's an interesting point, Rune. I think the point you made earlier is probably relevant as well. That a lot of the products that you can use, a lot of the stuff that used to just be antibacterial, there's a lot of stuff now that is antibacterial and antiviral, or the antiviral stuff is not much more expensive than the antibacterial. So possible to bring those things into your service, and I think that is probably a trend that will continue after things get back to normal. Not that they probably will, but I think it is likely that's one of the trends that will keep going. I just wanted to pick up on a point about the tech, because there's a question in there about the tech, and you guys obviously are both tech companies, so I just wanted to pick up on that, something that I thought was relevant, that the technology side of things. I think where that can really help is on the efficiency side of things, when it comes to the bookings and getting things much quicker on the booking side of things. But it's always going to be the situation that whatever the tech solution you have is, it's still going to end up with a human in a property doing the cleaning, or a human in the property checking off the inventory. Well, it might be the landlord or tenant or an inventory clerk like us, but cleaning is going to be a cleaning company. There's always going to be a human at the end of it. So those tech solutions, I think there's a lot of them that are fantastic, and there's new stuff coming out all the time, just getting better and better. Prop tech is absolutely exploding at the moment. But like I said, I think that the important thing to remember is at the end of that, you're always going to have a company like our companies, where you've got a human at the end of it who's going to actually do the job, and then their experience of knowing how to clean things properly, how to sanitize things properly, how to inspect the property properly if they're doing the check-in or check-out, that's what comes to the fore. So having that experience and that know-how is what you need. The two things, that and the tech, need to marry up, I think.
I think on that note as well, Will, it's often as well, it's like you say, it's only as good as the input, isn't it? Obviously we pride ourselves on, on the solution that we put together, and but it's possible to create a bad report on our platform if the input's not good. And often we see a real mix of people that when they come on and they have a trial with our platform, we offer, free screen share demos, and sometimes it's a real slog to get those agents, those landlords, those clerks to engage with the demo, because they say, well, I'm used to using tech, I know what I'm doing. But actually, if you've got training there and you've got someone that's going to show you how to do it, it's really important to engage with that training. We use all sorts of cloud-based platforms, and I take every opportunity to take any kind of free demo or free training, because I know the chances are it's going to save me an hour or two guessing or trying to fumble my way around something. I think it's really important that that people are sort of open-minded with that stuff when they take on board tech, and as you say, Will, as well, that the solution has to either be as good as or better in terms of the results, not just the time it saves, but it's all about the results. And if the end result is better than what you were doing before, and it's saving you time, then obviously that's where prop tech really ticks the box, isn't it? It's not it's not solutions for the sake of it. It's solutions that actually save money and drive that tenant satisfaction, and landlords in this case.
I think you're absolutely right, Richard. What we always say is it's technology where because there's a lot of things you don't do with technology, and I mean, we're big fans of technology, and we're big fans of new products, new innovations like robotic cleaners and everything else, everything we can do. And I think that there's a couple of things we've suggested as well and implemented was that we could, on a third-party validation, could go in, and we had it with a couple of landlords and a couple of estate agents who was asking for this, like, can we get a validation that the communal area has been cleaned, not by a signature on the wall or, you know, the usual way that it's done, but where you could QR scan a code, and then that would on our platform validate that the clean had been done, and it was sanitized, and it was done by that, and the pictures that was according to that, so we knew that was going to be done. Technology can really go deep into what's called checking, and it can really go deep into what I call guarantees. And that's the thing that I think, you know, as I said, like, not prop tech, but I think there's so much more that can be done. And I think that we're waiting for the landlords and the technology. We're not waiting for the technology. What we're waiting for is the adaptation in the industry. Saying, like, do we want, you know, because I can switch it on next month, you know, there's no problem. And the technology there, I can QR scan it, I can tell you exactly who was out there and clean it, I can tell you exactly how many milliliters of products they used. There's a number of technology I can also put into the house to say, like, okay, the doors are open 3 times. I know how much they've walked around. There's a ton of things I can do. We're sort of waiting more for the adaptation rather than going in and saying, like, here's the technology, because we feel that we're a service to them. It's not us dictating the product, but I think that maybe that's what we'd be thinking about more, dictating the products, and like, well, you know, the sanitized and fantastic is a way forward into it. So I think that that's one of the ways we can check it's done there.
Cheers, Rune. So guys, either have, we've got a couple of minutes or 1 or 2 minutes left just before we need to sign off. Do either of you have any final thoughts just on tenant satisfaction, or any final thoughts on you know, how we can move home as safely as possible? Anything really to sum up if you want to, or if you don't, then no problem.
But I suppose my quick summary would be, I think tenant satisfaction is these days about self-service wherever possible. You know, of course, tenants want to be able to reach out and speak to, you know, a property manager, or when they've got a problem, but equally at times they're going to want to do things that are in a way that's convenient for them. And I think that's certainly, you know, you see there's lots of platforms out there that allow that to happen now, and I think that's a lot of, you know, from a tenant satisfaction perspective, that's where I see the market going from my you know, sector, from the area that I dip my toe in, should I say. Cheers, Rich. Rune, anything from you?
What I would say is that I'm seeing more demand on 2 things from the end clients. Number one is about sustainability, and sustainability is in, like, eco products and so forth. The other thing that I'm seeing more demand on is, like, the demand for a clean, a proper clean, and Will, this is what you and me know, both of us have been experienced in it, is that the standard, right? What people expect from a clean now, you know, before that, a clean was a clean. You know, I know there's about 150 degrees of clean up to a sanitation of a complete hospital sanitation, starting from a physical clean up to a, you know, molecular clean of a property. I think that the understanding of that, and I think the tenants are now starting to know that, hold on, a dirty hallway is a dirty hallway, but not just the physical dirt. It's also like, well, hold on, that banister hasn't been cleaned for 3 years. And I see a lot of lower level of the cleaning of it is not really clean. It's hoovered. I mean, and a hoover is not a clean. This is, you know, we know that, right? It's not a clean. So I think that from the landlord perspective is, and we see that higher end properties who keep that maintained, they actually get the return because they are demanding the right rent or the right fee to the clean. So I think that now the consumers are getting, it's worthwhile investing in that and going that level above, because first of all, the rent will go up, and at the same time, you can keep a better standard. My biggest motto is like the best marketing you can ever do for your business is keeping your customers, right?
Yeah.
So I said, keep your tenants in there. Be proactive. That's my view. Right? Keep your customers.
Thank you.
Best
Thanks,
growth.
Rune. Yeah, I'm just going to add to that. I think I completely agree with everything you said there. The only thing I'd add is people have got higher standards of what they expect from a clean, and I think they've got higher standards of what they expect from a cleaner and an inventory clerk and anybody else that's going into their property. So I think that's the one that I'd leave it with, is that it's kind of like the builder's bum is dead. You need to be showing tenants that you have the correct standards and professionalism, that you are taking things seriously regarding COVID, and that you have got measures in place to ensure that you're doing everything you can to keep them as safe as possible. So I think that's just from a kind of a personal behaviour point of view about the people who are out there on site. Okay, that's it. I think we're just over time, so we're going to log out. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Speak to you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.